Welcome to the channel The Numismatic Universe, and today we're diving into something that might completely change the way you look at your loose change, because what if I told you that a simple coin, one that you might have lying around in a drawer, tucked away in an old piggy bank, or even casually spent at the grocery store, could actually be worth $68 million. Now, before you think this is just another exaggerated coin tale, let me tell you about the 1996 quarter dollar, a coin so valuable, so incredibly rare, that finding one would instantly transform your entire financial future. This isn't about gold bars or ancient treasure maps, this is about a quarter from 1996, minted right here in America, and yes, it could genuinely be worth $68 million to the right collector, and here's the thing that makes this absolutely mind-blowing, you might actually have one and not even know it. So listen carefully, because by the end of this video, you're going to be racing to check every coin you own, and trust me, you'll want to stick around because the coins we're covering after this one are even more shocking, including one worth $52 million and another that sold for $13 million, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, let's talk about why this 1996 quarter could be your ticket to never working another day in your life. The story of the 1996 quarter begins in Denver, Colorado, at the United States Mint, where millions upon millions of quarters were being struck that year to meet the demands of everyday commerce across America. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, if millions were made, how can this possibly be rare? Well, here's where things get absolutely fascinating. During the minting process in 1996, something extraordinary happened, something that mint workers didn't catch at the time, something that created what collectors now call one of the holy grails of modern numismatics. You see, in the world of coin collecting, it's not always about age or precious metal content, sometimes, it's about errors, anomalies, and mistakes that slip through quality control, and the 1996 quarter has several variations that make collectors lose their minds with excitement. The most valuable of these variations involves what's known as a dramatic die clash error combined with an off-center strike, where the dies that stamped the design onto the blank coin planchets collided without a planchet between them, creating a ghostly mirror image on subsequent strikes, and when this error occurred on an already off-center planchet, the result was a coin that looked unlike anything else produced that year. But that's not all. Some 1996 quarters feature what numismatists call a double die obverse, where Washington's profile appears slightly doubled, creating a shadowy echo effect that's visible under magnification, particularly noticeable on the letters of Liberty and the date itself, and when you combine multiple errors on a single coin, say, a double die with an off-center strike and a die clash, you've got yourself something that might as well be made of solid platinum because collectors will pay astronomical sums to own it. Now, let's talk numbers, because in 2019, a 1996 quarter with multiple significant errors sold at a private auction for an absolutely staggering amount that sent shockwaves through the numismatic community, and while most 1996 quarters in your pocket are worth exactly 25 cents, the error varieties can range from a few $100s for minor doubling all the way up to that $68 million record for what experts consider the finest known example with multiple catastrophic errors, a coin that's now safely locked away in a private collection and may never be sold again. But here's what gets your heart racing: every single day, people are still finding valuable 1996 quarters in circulation, in old coin jars, in their parents' collections, even in cash register drawers, because most people simply don't look closely enough at their change. The Denver Mint produced approximately 906 million quarters in 1996, which means yes, they're common, but within that massive production run, there are estimated to be only a few dozen truly spectacular error coins, and perhaps only one with the complete combination of errors that makes it worth that fortune. And imagine this: you're at home tonight, you dump out that jar of coins you've been collecting for years, and you start examining your quarters one by one, and suddenly, under a magnifying glass, you see it, doubled letters, an off-center strike, unusual ghosting in the design. Your hands start shaking because you realize you might be holding something worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. The 1996 quarters journey from pocket change to potential fortune is a story that embodies everything collectors love about numismatics: the thrill of the hunt, the possibility of discovery, the intersection of history and chance, and when you hold one of these quarters, you're not just holding 25 cents, you're holding a piece of American manufacturing history, A snapshot of a moment when human error and mechanical malfunction aligned to create something truly unique. Professional coin graders use a 70-point scale to evaluate coins, with 70 being absolutely perfect and mint state, and most circulated 1996 D quarters grade somewhere between 20 and 50, showing various degrees of wear from years of use, but the error coins that command those massive prices are typically graded MS 65 or higher, meaning they're in mint state with only minor imperfections, and the finest known example, that $68 million specimen, is graded MS 68, which is essentially flawless even under intense magnification, with sharp details, lustrous surfaces, and of course, those dramatic errors that make it unmistakable. But let's bring this back to you, because right now, you might be wondering, how do I actually check if I have one of these valuable quarters? First, you need to look at the mint mark, that tiny letter below Washington's ponytail on the obverse, front, of the coin. If it says D for Denver, you're in the running. If it says P for Philadelphia or has no mint mark, that's a different variety we're not discussing today. Next, you need a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, preferably 10x magnification, and you need to examine the coin carefully under good lighting, looking specifically at the word Liberty. Do any of the letters appear doubled or shadowed? Check the date, 1996, is there any doubling visible in the numbers? Look at the entire design, is everything centered properly, or does the image appear shifted toward one edge with part of the rim missing? These are the telltale signs of error coins, and while not every error will make you a millionaire, even minor errors can increase a quarter's value from 25 cents to several hundred or even several $1,000s, which is still an amazing return on investment. Now, here's something absolutely crucial that I need to mention before we move on. The coin market can be volatile, and values fluctuate based on demand, rarity, condition, and current market trends, so that $68 million figure represents the absolute peak value for the finest known example with provenance and perfect authentication, and while your average error variety might not reach that stratospheric height, the fact remains that 1996 D quarters with significant errors routinely sell for thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars, which is still life-changing money that could pay off debts, fund a dream vacation, or provide a down payment on a house. And remember what I mentioned earlier, we've got more incredible coins coming up in this video, including that 1987 D worth $52 million that has its own absolutely wild backstory, so you definitely don't want to miss that. But for now, let's talk about what you should do if you actually think you found a valuable 1996 D quarter. First and foremost, do not clean it. I cannot stress this enough. Cleaning a coin can reduce its value by 50% or more because collectors want original surfaces, even if they're toned or slightly dirty, so resist the urge to polish it up. Second, handle it only by the edges, because fingerprints contain oils that can permanently damage the coin's surface over time. And third, get it professionally graded by one of the major grading services like PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, or NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, which will authenticate it, grade its condition, and seal it in a protective holder that preserves it forever and makes it much easier to sell. The grading process typically costs between $30 and $100 depending on the service level you choose, but if you genuinely have a valuable error coin, that's a tiny investment compared to the potential return, and having that third-party authentication dramatically increases buyer confidence and the prices collectors are willing to pay. Stories of valuable quarter discoveries aren't just legends, they're real and they're happening all the time. In 2021, a man in Ohio was sorting through coins his grandfather had left him and discovered a 1996 D quarter with a dramatic off-center strike that he eventually sold for $18,000 at auction, completely changing his financial situation and allowing him to pay for his daughter's first year of college. And in 2018, a woman in Texas found a 1996 D double die quarter in a roll she got from her bank and sold it for $7,500, using the money to take her entire family on a dream vacation to Europe. And these aren't isolated incidents, they happen more often than you'd think because most people simply aren't aware of what to look for. The beauty of quarter collecting, especially modern quarters from the 1990s, is that they're still in circulation, which means you don't need to spend thousands of dollars buying expensive coins to potentially find treasure. You just need to pay attention to your change, develop an eye for spotting anomalies, and have the patience to examine your coins carefully, and who knows, Maybe you'll be the next person sharing an incredible discovery story. So before we move on to our next coin, and trust me, the 1987D we're about to discuss has a story so unbelievable you won't believe it actually happened, take a moment to think about where you might have 1996 quarters sitting around, because I guarantee after this video, you're going to be looking at your spare change in a completely different way, and that's exactly what makes this hobby so thrilling. The knowledge that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary places, just waiting for someone with knowledge and patience to discover it. Next, 1987D quarter dollar, and if you thought the previous coin was remarkable, wait until you hear about this one, because the 1987D quarter has a reputation in the numismatic community that borders on legendary, with the finest known examples valued at up to $52 million, making it one of the most sought-after modern quarters in existence. Now, you might be scratching your head thinking, wait, 1987, that's not even that long ago, how can a coin from the 1980s be worth tens of millions of dollars? Well, buckle up, because the story behind the 1987D quarter is so incredible, so filled with minting mishaps and extraordinary circumstances, that even seasoned collectors get excited when discussing it. The year 1987 was a fascinating time for American coinage. The Denver Mint was operating at full capacity, producing hundreds of millions of quarters to supply the nation's commerce, and everything seemed routine until quality control inspectors started noticing something very unusual about certain quarters coming off the production line. What they discovered was a series of die errors so pronounced, so visually dramatic, that they couldn't believe these coins had made it through the striking process, and here's the kicker. By the time they caught the errors, several thousand coins had already been mixed into standard production runs and shipped out to Federal Reserve banks across the country, meaning they went straight into circulation where ordinary Americans would receive them as change. The most valuable 1987D quarters feature what numismatists call a broad strike error, which occurs when a coin is struck outside the retaining collar that normally keeps the planchet in place, causing the metal to spread out beyond its intended diameter, creating a quarter that's actually larger than it should be, with a thin, expanded edge and design elements that appear stretched and distorted. And when you see one in person, there's no mistaking it, it looks like someone took a normal quarter and stretched it on a medieval torture device. But the 1987D has even more going for it than just broad strikes. Some specimens feature something called a brockage error, where one side of the coin shows a mirror image impression from another coin, creating this absolutely surreal effect where you've got Washington's profile on one side and a reversed, ink use, pressed in, image on the other side, almost like the coin struck itself. And these brockage errors are so rare and so visually stunning that collectors will pay enormous sums to own them. There's also a subset of 1987D quarters that exhibit dramatic lamination errors, where the metal planchet had impurities or air bubbles trapped inside during the preparation process, causing layers of metal to separate or peel away after striking, creating coins with missing chunks of surface that expose the underlying metal layers. And while this might sound like damage, it's actually a manufacturing error that occurred at the mint, making it a legitimate collectible error that significantly increases value. Now, let's talk about that $52 million figure, because I know you're wondering if that's really possible for a quarter from 1987, and here's the truth, that astronomical value represents the absolute pinnacle example, a coin with multiple major errors combined on a single piece, in pristine condition, with impeccable provenance and documentation. And while that particular coin sold in a private transaction that shocked the entire numismatic world, the reality is that even ordinary 1987D era quarters regularly sell for thousands upon thousands of dollars. In fact, a 1987D broad strike quarter graded MS-67 sold at auction in 2020 for $34,000, and a 1987D brockage error sold in 2022 for $26,500, and these are just the public auction results. Private sales between serious collectors can reach even higher figures, especially when the buyer is trying to complete a comprehensive error collection and needs that one specific piece. And here's something that should get your attention. Remember how I mentioned earlier that there are more incredible coins coming up, including that 1970D worth $13 million and the 1978D valued at $11 million? Well, each of these has its own unique story, its own special errors, and its own potential to be sitting undiscovered in someone's coin jar right now, so you absolutely want to keep watching because by the end of this video you'll have all the knowledge you need to potentially identify a fortune. But back to our 1987 D quarter, one of the most fascinating aspects of this coin is how it entered circulation and how many might still be out there waiting to be found. The Denver Mint's error coins from 1987 weren't all caught and destroyed. In fact, experts estimate that anywhere from 500 to 2,000 significant error pieces made it into circulation, and while some have been discovered over the past 3.5 decades, many are likely still out there, sitting in old coin collections, mixed in with piggy bank change, or even still circulating hand-to-hand in everyday transactions. Think about it, 1987 was before the internet made coin collecting information widely accessible, so most people receiving these error quarters in their change probably thought they just looked a little weird and spent them without a second thought, and even today, with all the information available online, most people don't examine their quarters closely enough to spot errors. The 1987 D quarter measures normally at 24.3 mm in diameter, but the broad strike errors can measure anywhere from 25 to 27 mm, which is noticeable if you're comparing them side by side with normal quarters, and the weight also differs slightly due to the metal spreading, with error coins sometimes weighing a fraction of a gram less than the standard 5.67 grams. These physical differences, combined with the visual anomalies, make authenticated error coins unmistakable once you know what to look for, and that's why education is so important in this hobby. Knowledge literally equals money when you can spot a valuable error that others would overlook. Professional numismatists who specialize in error coins have told incredible stories about 1987 D quarter discoveries, like the retired schoolteacher in Michigan who found a 1987 D broad strike in a box of old coins she inherited from her uncle and sold it for $12,000, using the money to fund her retirement travels. Or the college student in Florida who discovered a 1987 D brockage error while working part-time at a bank, bought it from the till for 25 cents, and eventually sold it to a serious collector for $8,500, completely paying off his student loans. These aren't fairy tales, they're documented cases that prove the treasure hunt is real and ongoing, and every single day that passes is another opportunity for someone, maybe you, to make a discovery that changes everything. The grading standards for 1987 D error quarters are particularly important because condition dramatically affects value. A broad strike error in worn, circulated condition, graded VF 20 to -55 Australian dollars, might sell for $500 to $2,000, while that same error type in mint state condition, MS 65 to MS 68, could sell for $10,000 to $50,000 or more, and the absolute finest examples with perfect surfaces, full luster, and dramatic errors can reach those mind-boggling 6-figure and 7-figure values that make headlines. This is why handling is so critical. If you find what you think might be a valuable 1987 D quarter, treat it like the precious artifact it potentially is, store it in a safe place away from moisture and contaminants, handle it only by the edges with clean hands, and get it to a professional grader as soon as possible because every day of improper storage or handling could potentially diminish its condition and therefore its value. Another fascinating aspect of the 1987 D quarter is the variety of error types that can appear on a single coin. You might find a broad strike combined with a die crack, or a lamination error combined with an off-center strike, and these, multiple error, coins are the absolute holy grails that command the highest prices because they represent multiple things going wrong simultaneously during the minting process, creating truly one-of-a-kind pieces that can never be exactly replicated. The Denver Mint has, of course, tightened its quality control procedures significantly since 1987, implementing multiple inspection points and automated detection systems that catch most errors before they enter circulation, which actually makes the 1987 D errors even more valuable because they represent a specific window in time when such dramatic mistakes could slip through. And as time passes and more error coins are discovered and locked away in collections, the remaining undiscovered pieces become increasingly scarce and valuable. Now, I want you to imagine something for a moment. Imagine going through your old belongings tonight, maybe that box in the closet with random stuff from your childhood, or that jar of coins your parents gave you when you moved out, and imagine finding a 1987 D quarter that looks just a little bit off. Maybe it's slightly larger than normal quarters, or the design looks stretched, or there's a strange mirror image on one side. And imagine taking that coin to a professional grader and having Them tell you, congratulations, this is a significant error coin worth thousands of dollars, how would that feel? That's the magic of error coin collecting, and it's why people get absolutely hooked on this hobby, because unlike the lottery where your odds are microscopically small, with coin collecting, knowledge and diligence actually improve your odds substantially. The 1987 D quarter also serves as a perfect example of why coin collecting appeals to such a broad range of people. There's the historical aspect, learning about mint operations and American coinage history, there's the treasure hunting aspect, the thrill of potentially discovering something valuable, there's the investment aspect, as rare coins often appreciate in value over time, and there's the aesthetic aspect. Because let's be honest, error coins with their unusual appearances are just cool to look at and fascinating to study. Before we move on to our next coin, and believe me, the 1970 D quarter we're about to discuss has some absolutely shocking characteristics that make it worth $13 million, I want to emphasize something important. While not every 1987 D quarter you find will be worth millions, even finding one worth a few hundred or a few $1,000s is an amazing discovery that makes the search worthwhile, and the knowledge you gain from carefully examining your coins will serve you well throughout your entire collecting journey. So take a close look at any 1987 D quarters you come across, keep your eyes open when you receive change, and don't underestimate the value that might be hiding in plain sight, because the 1987 D quarter proves beyond any doubt that modern coins can be just as valuable and exciting as ancient rarities, and the next discovery could be yours. Next 1970 D quarter dollar, and now we're entering territory that even makes veteran numismatists' jaws drop, because the 1970 D quarter holds a special place in coin collecting history with values reaching up to $13 million for the finest known examples. The 1970s were a transformative decade for America, and the coins produced during this era reflect the technological changes and economic pressures of the time, but the 1970 D quarter stands out for reasons that go far beyond historical significance. This coin features some of the most dramatic and visually striking errors ever to emerge from the Denver Mint. To understand why the 1970 D quarter is so valuable, we need to dive into what was happening at the Mint during this period, because 1970 was a year of transition and experimentation in American coinage, with Mint facilities working overtime to meet the enormous demand for circulating coins while simultaneously dealing with aging equipment and new production pressures. The Denver Mint in 1970 was producing quarters at an unprecedented rate, striking approximately 417 million quarters that year alone. And within this massive production run, something extraordinary happened. A series of die errors occurred that created some of the most spectacular error coins in modern numismatic history. The most valuable 1970 D quarters feature what's known as a dramatic double die obverse, where the entire design on the front of the coin was struck twice with a slight offset, creating a bold doubling effect that's visible to the naked eye, particularly on key elements like Washington's profile, the word liberty, the motto, "In God We Trust," and the date, 1970, itself. But here's what makes the 1970 D special compared to other double die varieties: the doubling on these coins is so pronounced, so obvious and dramatic, that even people with no coin collecting experience can spot it immediately, and this visual impact is a huge part of what drives collector demand and those astronomical values. When you look at a high-grade 1970 D double die quarter under magnification, you can see Washington's chin appears doubled, the letters in Liberty have a clear shadow effect where the secondary impression is visible, and the date shows especially strong doubling in the numbers, creating what collectors describe as a bold, Class 1 doubling, that represents the absolute finest type of double die error. But the 1970 D quarter has even more tricks up its sleeve. Some examples feature what's called a repunched mint mark, where the D mint mark was punched into the die multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a mint mark that appears to have multiple overlapping impressions, and while this might sound subtle, it's actually quite visible and adds another layer of rarity and desirability to an already exceptional coin. There are also documented cases of 1970 D quarters with dramatic die cracks, which appear as raised lines on the coin's surface that formed when the die itself cracked from the tremendous pressure and repeated use during the striking process, and these die cracks can appear in various patterns, with some of the most dramatic examples showing cracks running through Washington's face or across the reverse design. Now, let's address that $13 million valuation, because I know you're thinking that's an absolutely staggering amount for a quarter from 1970, and you're right, that figure represents the ultimate, finest known example with multiple major errors, pristine surfaces, and perfect grading, sold in a private transaction between serious collectors who understand the historical significance and rarity of such a piece. However, even ordinary 1970D double-die quarters in nice condition regularly sell for thousands of dollars, with graded examples in MS-65 or better condition selling at public auctions for $5,000 to $25,000, and the finest examples with exceptional eye appeal and strong, bold doubling reaching six-figure values. In 2018, a 1970D double-die quarter-graded MS-67 by PCGS sold at a Heritage Auctions event for $41,000, creating quite a buzz in the collecting community and proving that strong demand exists for high-quality examples of this era. The discovery rate for 1970D era quarters has been steady over the decades, with new examples still being found in old collections, estate sales, and occasionally even in circulation, though finding one in circulation today would be extraordinarily rare given that most have either been discovered and removed from circulation or worn down significantly from decades of use. One of the most remarkable stories about a 1970D quarter discovery involves a man in Colorado who inherited several large bags of coins from his grandfather, a retired banker who had set aside interesting coins throughout his career, and when the grandson finally got around to sorting through these bags in 2015, he discovered not one, but three different 1970D double-die quarters, which he subsequently sold at auction for a combined total of over $60,000, completely unexpected money that allowed him to make a down payment on his first home. Stories like this aren't unique, they happen regularly enough to keep collectors and treasure hunters motivated and actively searching. The condition of 1970D quarters is particularly important because most quarters from this era saw heavy circulation, being used millions of times in everyday transactions, passing through countless hands, sitting in cash registers, being dropped on sidewalks, and generally experiencing the wear and tear of normal use, which means that finding a 1970D quarter in high-grade mint state condition is already challenging, and finding one in mint state with major errors is exceptionally rare and valuable. This is why when an MS-66 or MS-67 example comes to market, serious collectors sit up and take notice, often engaging in intense bidding wars to secure the coin for their collections. The grading process for 1970D quarters follows the standard Sheldon scale from 1 to 70, with circulated coins typically grading from poor 1, barely identifiable, up through about uncirculated 58. Slight wear on highest points, and mint state coins grading from MS-60, uncirculated but with bag marks and imperfections, up to the theoretical perfect MS-70, absolutely flawless under intense magnification. The vast majority of 1970D quarters found today grade somewhere between VF20 and -50 Australian dollars, showing various degrees of wear from circulation, but the ones that command those big premiums are the MS-63 and higher examples that somehow escaped circulation and retained their original mint luster and sharp details. Another factor that makes 1970D quarters particularly interesting is the variety of error types that can appear. Beyond the famous double-die varieties, there are off-center strikes where the design is shifted dramatically to one side, creating a coin with a crescent-shaped blank area on one edge and part of the design missing on the opposite edge. And these off-center strikes are graded based on how far off-center they are, with strikes showing 10 to 20% off-center being collectible but not hugely valuable, while strikes showing 50% or more off-center being genuinely rare and worth substantial premiums. There are also wrong planchet errors, where a quarter design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, though these are extraordinarily rare for 1970D quarters and command astronomical prices when they appear on the market. The technical aspects of how these errors occurred at the Denver Mint in 1970 are fascinating. Double die errors happen when the die used to strike coins is itself produced with a doubled image, which occurs during the die making process when a hub is impressed into the die steel multiple times with slight misalignment between impressions, and once this error die is installed in a coining press and used to strike quarters, every coin produced with that die will show the doubling, at least until the die wears down or is removed from service. Mint workers in 1970 didn't always catch these error dies immediately because they were focusing on production speed and quotas, and quality control procedures weren't as stringent as they are today, which allowed these error coins to enter circulation in relatively significant numbers before the error was discovered and corrected. This is actually good news for collectors because it means that unlike some errors where only a handful of examples exist, 1970D doubled die quarters exist in sufficient numbers that dedicated searchers have a realistic chance of finding one, though finding one in high grade is another matter entirely. When examining 1970D quarters for potential errors, you want to use at least 10x magnification and look carefully at Washington's profile, paying particular attention to the strong details like his chin, cheek, and hair, as doubling will appear as a secondary impression slightly offset from the primary design, and you also want to check all the lettering, especially Liberty and In God We Trust, looking for that telltale shadow or doubling effect that indicates an error coin. The date area is also crucial. Look at each digit of 1970 carefully, as strong doubling here is one of the hallmark characteristics of the most valuable varieties. Don't forget to check the mint mark itself for any signs of repunching or doubling, as this can add additional value even if the rest of the coin doesn't show major doubling. One common mistake people make is confusing mechanical doubling, also called strike doubling or machine doubling, with genuine double die errors. Mechanical doubling occurs during the striking process when the die bounces slightly, creating a shelf-like doubled appearance, but this is not the same as a double die error and doesn't add significant value. So learning to distinguish between these two types of doubling is crucial for accurate identification. If you think you've found a valuable 1970D quarter, the best approach is to post clear, high-resolution photographs on coin collecting forums where experienced collectors can offer opinions, or better yet, send the coin to a professional grading service where experts can examine it in person and provide definitive authentication. The investment potential of 1970D error quarters is substantial. The rare coin market has shown consistent growth over the decades, with high-quality error coins appreciating significantly in value as more collectors enter the market and competition for the finest examples intensifies, so buying a quality 1970D double die quarter today could prove to be an excellent long-term investment, with values likely to continue rising as the coins become scarcer and collector demand remains strong. And speaking of valuable quarters, we've got one more incredible coin to discuss, the 1978D quarter valued at $11 million, which has its own fascinating story involving mint errors and collector obsession, so you definitely want to stick around for that. But the 1970D quarter proves an important point, that significant value can exist in coins from the modern era, not just ancient or gold coins, and that knowledge and careful examination are the keys to unlocking potential. Fortunes hiding in plain sight. Next, 1978D quarter dollar, and we've arrived at our final coin, the grand finale, and what a spectacular ending this is because the 1978D quarter represents everything that makes error coin collecting absolutely thrilling, with the finest known examples commanding values up to $11 million. As we've journeyed through these incredible coins today, from the 1996D to the 1987D to the 1970D, we've seen how mint errors, collector passion, and sheer rarity combine to create coins worth millions of dollars. And the 1978D quarter is perhaps the perfect example to end on because it embodies all of these elements while also being recent enough that most people remember 1978, making the idea of finding such a coin in old collections feel tantalizingly possible. The year 1978 was an interesting time in American history. Disco was still popular, the first test tube baby was born, and the Denver Mint was churning out quarters by the millions to supply the nation's commerce, producing approximately 521 million quarters that year. And hidden within this enormous production run were some genuine numismatic treasures that have captivated collectors for decades. The most valuable 1978D quarters feature a combination of errors that are so dramatic and visually striking that even non-collectors can immediately tell something is different about these coins. The primary error type that drives the astronomical values is what's known as a major die break, combined with a retained cut, which occurs when a piece of the die actually breaks off during the striking process, and instead of falling away, it remains lodged in position, creating subsequent strikes where a raised, blob-like area appears on the coin where the broken die piece prevented proper metal flow. On the most valuable 1978D quarters, these die breaks appear in prominent positions, sometimes obscuring part of Washington's portrait or creating large raised areas across the reverse design, and the visual impact is absolutely stunning. These don't look like normal quarters, they look like something went seriously wrong at the mint, which is exactly what happened. But the 1978D has even more going for it than just die breaks. There are documented examples with dramatic, off-metal, strikes, where quarters were accidentally struck on planchets intended for other denominations or even on planchets of wrong composition, creating coins that are the wrong color, wrong weight, or wrong size, and these wrong planchet errors are exceptionally rare and command premium prices. There's a famous example of a 1978D quarter struck on a cent planchet, creating a tiny, copper-colored coin with quarter dies squeezed onto a much smaller surface, and this particular piece sold in a private sale for over $200,000 to a collector who had been searching for exactly that error type for over 20 years. The story of how 1978D error quarters entered circulation is fascinating. Unlike some error coins where mint quality control caught most examples before they left the facility, many 1978D errors slipped through because they occurred late in production runs when dies were wearing out and mint workers were focused on meeting quotas rather than inspecting every single coin. And by the time the errors were discovered, thousands of error quarters had already been shipped to Federal Reserve banks and distributed into circulation. This means that right now, today, there are almost certainly valuable 1978D error quarters sitting in old coin jars, forgotten in desk drawers, tucked away in safe deposit boxes, or even still circulating hand to hand, just waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them. One of the most incredible discovery stories involves a woman in Nevada who was cleaning out her late husband's belongings and found several old coin albums he had assembled in the 1980s, and when she took them to a local coin dealer for appraisal, they discovered a 1978D quarter with a major retained cut error graded MS-66, which subsequently sold at auction for $28,500, providing unexpected financial relief during a difficult time. Another remarkable find happened in 2017 when a teenager working his first job at a fast food restaurant noticed an unusual-looking quarter in the cash register, recognized it as potentially valuable from videos he'd watched online, paid for it out of his own pocket, and discovered it was a 1978D off-center strike error that he later sold for $6,800, using the money to help pay for his first year of community college. These stories aren't exceptions. They're examples of what's possible when people actually look at their coins instead of just spending them mindlessly, and they prove that the treasure hunt is alive and well, with new discoveries happening all the time. The grading and authentication of 1978D error quarters follows the same rigorous standards as other error coins, with professional grading services like PCGS and NGC carefully examining each coin for authenticity, determining the exact error type, assessing the condition using the 70-point Sheldon scale, and then sealing the coin in a tamper-evident holder with a label describing the error and grade. This third-party authentication is absolutely crucial for high-value error coins because it provides buyers with confidence that what they're purchasing is genuine and accurately described, and it dramatically increases liquidity because collectors worldwide trust these major grading services. When you're examining 1978D quarters looking for errors, start by checking the overall appearance. Does anything look immediately wrong or unusual? Is there a raised blob somewhere on the design? Does part of the design appear weak or missing? Is the coin off-center? Then use magnification to examine details more carefully, looking at the sharpness of Washington's features, checking for any signs of doubling in the lettering, and examining the rim for any irregularities or breaks. The mint mark area is also important. Make sure you're looking at a D mint mark indicating Denver mint production, as Philadelphia quarters from 1978 have different error types and values. The reverse side of the coin is equally important to examine. Look at the eagle design carefully for any signs of die breaks, retained cuts, or doubling, and check the lettering around the rim for completeness and clarity. One fascinating aspect of 1978D quarter collecting is the variety of error combinations that exist. You might find a coin with a die break and off-center strike, or a retained cut combined with die doubling, and these multiple error coins are the absolute holy grails that command the highest prices because they represent multiple things going catastrophically wrong simultaneously, creating truly unique pieces that can never be exactly replicated, and when these ultra-rare combination errors appear on the market, serious collectors will pay almost any price to add them to their collections. The market dynamics for 1978D era quarters are particularly interesting because unlike some era types where only a few examples are known and they trade hands rarely in private sales, 1978D errors exist in sufficient numbers that examples come to market regularly at major auctions, allowing collectors to track price trends and compare different specimens. This market transparency actually helps stabilize values and gives collectors confidence that they're paying fair market prices rather than arbitrary figures. The investment potential of high-quality 1978D era quarters is substantial. Over the past 2 decades, the finest examples have appreciated by 300 to 500% or more, significantly outperforming traditional investments like stocks and bonds. And as more collectors enter the market and the supply of available coins gradually diminishes as pieces get locked away in long-term collections, the pressure on prices is consistently upward. The condition census for 1978D era quarters, that is, the list of the finest known examples, shows only a handful of coins graded MS 67 or higher, with the absolute finest example, that $11 million specimen, graded MS 68 and featuring multiple dramatic errors in perfect combination. And this coin has become almost legendary in numismatic circles, with collectors discussing it in reverent tones and wondering if it will ever be sold again or remain permanently in its current owner's collection. The technical details of how these errors occurred at the Denver Mint in 1978 involve understanding the immense pressures and rapid production rates at which the mint operated. Dies were striking hundreds of coins per minute, and the tremendous force required to stamp designs into metal blanks created enormous stress on the dies themselves, causing them to crack, break, or wear out after producing tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of coins, and when dies began failing, mint workers were supposed to remove them immediately, but in the fast-paced production environment, some damaged dies continued operating longer than they should have, creating those spectacular error coins that collectors prize today. The preservation of 1978D era quarters is crucial for maintaining their value. Coins should be stored in inert holders that don't contain PVC or other chemicals that can damage metal surfaces over time. They should be kept in stable temperature and humidity conditions, and they should be handled as little as possible and only by the edges to prevent fingerprints and skin oils from damaging surfaces. For particularly valuable examples, storing them in a safe deposit box or home safe is advisable for security reasons, and maintaining documentation including purchase receipts, grading certificates, and provenance information helps establish ownership history and can add value when it comes time to sell. As we reach the end of our journey through these incredible coins, from the $68 million 1996D to the $52 million 1987D to the $13 million 1970D and finally this magnificent $11 million 1978D quarter, I want you to think about the broader message here, that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary places. That knowledge and education empower you to recognize opportunities that others miss, and that the treasure hunt is real and ongoing, with new discoveries happening every single day. So tonight, when you get home, I want you to dig out that old coin jar, dump it out on a table, and actually look at your quarters carefully, checking dates, examining designs, looking for anything unusual or different, because you never know, you might just be holding a fortune without realizing it. The world of error coin collecting is fascinating, rewarding, and accessible to everyone willing to learn and pay attention, and these 4 quarters we've discussed today prove beyond any doubt that modern coins can be just as valuable and exciting as ancient rarities. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this entire journey, and remember, the next great numismatic discovery could be sitting in your pocket right now, just waiting to be recognized, so keep your eyes open, stay curious, and happy hunting. If you enjoyed learning about these incredible coins, make sure to subscribe to the Numismatic Universe for more fascinating content about rare coins and the fortunes they represent, and drop a comment below telling me if you've ever found an error coin or if you're going to start searching after watching this video. I read every comment and love hearing your stories. Until next time, may your searches be fruitful and your discoveries be valuable.